This first summary can make me the odd man out. Can actually impact all the parties that my children go to, and even the society that I live in. Stay tuned for podcast number 1. It's crazy. Then we can start thinking about the future and sex dolls and what an anthropology believes might be the future of love and all that stories. Also, a great summary of an OG, Royce Gracie, and one of the fathers of jiu-jitsu. That's podcast number 3. Finally, we could put it all together by a great explorer, researcher, naturalist, and the founders of Jungle Keepers, Rosolie. And let me tell you, I was jealous of Lex Friedman that went to the Amazon jungle. The Amazon jungle. That and more here on the next episode of the Podcast Summary Report. Stay tuned. Welcome back, everyone, to episode 15 of the Podcast Summary Report. I got a lot of great information for you, for your benefit, for your value, that you can click and watch these 4 podcasts, because every single one of them was great. But let me start right into the very first podcast that we're summarizing today is The Diary of a CEO with Robert Lustig. And that was 1 hour and 52 minutes. Podcast number 2 is Chris Williamson with Roanne Van Voorst. She is an anthropologist, and this podcast lasted 1 hour and 1 minute, a quick one. Then a Joe Rogan Experience MMA episode 156 with none other than Royce Gracie. This one lasted for 2 hours and 3 minutes. And we pull it all together, we close it off with Lex Friedman podcast, episode 429 with Rosolie. This one lasted 4 hours and 1 minute. Very well. Let's dive right into the very first podcast that we're summarizing today. And that was The Diary of a CEO with Robert Lustig. And Robert is a pediatric endocrinologist. He's a researcher, he is an author, and just a proponent of a better life. What does it mean? So the key message of this podcast is that our brains have been hacked, and that sugar is one of the most addictive substances in the world right now that is making us chronically obese. That is the message of this podcast. But let me tell you, the way this podcast started was by this story, and how in the 1970s, early 1980s, how the food industry bribed some doctors and make saturated fat as the villain, and sugar went unscathed. Well, now, 60 years later, 50 years later, we have seen how that decision for just a few dollars, $50,000 back then to these doctors, has made a tremendous, dangerous impact to their current society. In the Western civilization, especially in the US and the UK and other Western countries. The US has over 42% of its people are obese. Close to 70% of them are overweight, and the trend keeps going into the wrong direction. The start of the podcast was very impactful because Dr. Robert Lustig was saying how our brains were hacked, how just the food industry was able to manipulate the way that we saw food, and now it's everywhere. He describes grocery stores as a minefield, when we go and we're just inundated by things that we think are healthy, that we think are okay for us, that sugar is just not that bad actor, and that we can just easily buy any of these products and it won't affect us. And he goes down the science on how calories are not calories in, calories out. And if you're consuming these high fructose corn syrup calories, these sugary calories, these enriched flour calories, all of these processed food calories, then that is just doing a detriment to your health, is taking you down the path of possible depression, insulin resistance, and just anything that is affecting your body and making you fatter, making you weaker, and making you more depressed. the direction of this particular podcast is stayed on this line, and they didn't deviate. They were talking about all the impacts, the sugar problem in our society, how we have health side effects from sugar, and it's just over a 30 to 40 minute discussion on just the impactful damage that sugar has done to us, and also what can we do to fight back, first in our personal responsibility, and then in just communicating to others the damage that this has done to us. He continues by discussing how food that is so important, that doesn't contain sugar, natural food, things that you can actually buy and cook for yourself, how that just improves everything across your health. And just that we should focus our attention, focus our energy on that type of nutrition, that type of food, and stay away from everything that has to do with sugar, all has to do with processed foods, and especially everything that has to revolves around that type of food, that type of nutrition, right? If you call it nutrition. But also he says to be aware of products around our environment, products around our world, our the regular life, plastic products, plastic bottles, creams that have parabens or just other unnatural chemicals that are considered obesogens. And these obesogens, I have the timestamp where you can you can listen to that. How are they making us fat? How are they changing the chemicals in our bodies to make us more insulin resistant, fat, are taking our bodies towards that direction? And if you are having issues with any of these type of diets or nutrition, how it's just stacked against you to be able to make healthier decisions, right? So he just has that a main message. That's the key importance. But he closes the podcast by saying that it's on us. It's on every adult, every parent, every father, every mother, to be able to have those conversations with your children, educate them on the importance of eating healthier, and taking away those choices, because it is hacking our brains. It's addictive. The sugar is so addictive to us that it's been proven in studies after studies that it's almost the same amount of addiction as cocaine. So he concludes the podcast by saying that he's hopeful that there's countries like Japan that are doing this the right way. There are apps in our phones that can filter our grocery stores by removing everything that has sugar, everything that has high fructose corn syrup or enriched flour, anything like that can be filtered, can be helpful for us. And then we just go order those things online and then pick them up without having to step in those grocery stores, like I said, that they're a minefield. So very, very impactful podcast. This is the one I recommend you the most out of the four that I'm summarizing today, because it just opens your eyes on the landmines, food landmines that we currently reside. And everything, almost everything has sugar, and we have to stay away from those products. All right, very well. Now moving to podcast summary number 2, which is Chris Williamson with Roanne Van Voorst. She's an anthropologist, a researcher, and author. And the message on this podcast was the future of love, the future of romance, the future of our current society with technology. They dive in right away. The starts was their conversation of her research in sex dolls and just the cost of these sex dolls and the new improvements and technology, how it's becoming just readily available, especially in countries like Japan and South Korea, and some of those countries that they have certain difficulties approaching women, but it's just how easy it is for those to become popular now. And the conversation is just around really how our current society, we are connected virtually with our phones, with our social media and everything, but we really are disconnected in the human experience. And Roanne just continues to talk about how because of those symptoms that we're not addressing them from the root cause, more solutions are coming about with sex dolls, with love pills, that I put timestamp on that it might help you feel more aroused by the other person or more connected. And other things like electronics and even virtual relationships where you can have a friendship with an AI bot versus an actual real person. This AI bot can have a conversation with you via your phone or your computer, and you can actually start having conversations with that bot versus an actual friend or person or human. So this was a very interesting topic, very short, 1 hour. They did not deviate from the topic. They stayed in the topic, and you can see how this individual Roanne is very open to all these types of experience. She went and researched the sex dolls, these love pills, massages, erotic massages, and just everything to understand how our society is moving in this particular direction, and then what can we do if we want to try and preserve that human connection with others. So very interesting. They closed the topic. They closed the podcast by talking about even individuals, asexual individuals that really are not as interested in sex and topics around that area, but just how she's analyzing everything in between. And then she provides her optimism for the future, that as long as we try to continue to communicate with others and have that conversation, that we can still manage on this society. But she does see that in the future, this is going to be a lot more popular, a lot more prevalent. And I don't know what's going to be next for the next generations. That's going to be determined. But it really comes down to your responsibility to be able to educate or emphasize the importance of that human experience to your children and to your next generations. That was a short one, but that's podcast number 2 with Chris Williamson and Roanne Van Voorst. Moving on to the third podcast that we're summarizing today. It is a Joe Rogan Experience mixed martial art episode. Episode number is 156 with Royce Gracie. And this was a quick one, 2 hours. Joe usually averages 3, like I said before. But Royce Gracie is the OG. If you do not know who Royce Gracie is a retired mixed martial artist. And he first came in fame with UFC 1 and UFC 2 when he won those events back in 1996, if I'm not mistaken. But back in the mid-90s. And he was the one that showed the world how jiu-jitsu and a person that did not want to hurt the others was able to go against the best boxers, the best kickboxers, and even a huge individual that was just a puncher and just a massive force. And it connects back to this great family, the Gracie family, and how they revolutionized the mixed martial arts community. The main message of this one is mixed martial arts. So I love this episode. I've been practicing the art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for 5 years now. So I love this. And I admire Royce Gracie. If you practice the art, he should be your hero. Great conversation, great communication. You can see how Joyce was just having a great time. The topic, the first hour and 20 to 30 minutes, first 80 to 90 minutes, like I'm saying, was around mixed martial arts, his experience, his brother Hickson, and how he is even better than Royce, how just incredible that family it was. The mentality behind how they would just train. They were trained. I don't want to call them trained killers, but they were trained soldiers in this art of jiu-jitsu. What happened to him in the early days of the UFC, and just taking Brazilian jiu-jitsu worldwide, and how important that was for what we currently see right now in the UFC. And then who would guess in 1996 that UFC 1 and UFC 2 with Royce Gracie would spur or would birth one of the biggest, if not the most popular sport right now in the world, which is UFC and mixed martial arts. And Joe Rogan, which you're talking about 12 to 13 years now being a back then he would interview the UFC fighters after their fights, is now the number one podcaster in the world. So you have like two individuals that were the start of something amazing, of something incredible. The last 30 minutes was just a more fun conversation between them because Royce is getting into bow hunting, so he's talking about his experience there. He just they quickly discussed about California and how he still loves California, but he is just very sad on how that state has gone down in both just security, finances, just with the homelessness and everything. It's been a quite impacted state, but he's still hopeful that they may be able to recover it. But he is moving to Florida, and they closed it off by saying that he is opening a school, a Gracie school by Royce Gracie in Florida, and he doesn't have all the details yet. He couldn't share all the details yet with Joe, but he's saying that it's going to be a great school, quite a large school, and then he's just has great vision. And Joe's like, you got to tell me all the details when you have them because I want to share them out with everyone. So let's do it again. Great episode. If you do not like mixed martial arts MMA, you can skip it. If you don't have enough time, you can just pick certain sections. But if you do, if you practice MMA, if you like Joe, you got to listen to the OG, Royce Gracie. All right, that's podcast 3 summarized. Now, pulling it all together, taking it home with Lex Friedman podcast, episode 429 with Paul Rosolie. This one lasted 4 hours. And this one lasted 4 hours with Lex having his suit, the way he does all of his podcast, in the rainforest, in the Amazon rainforest for 4 hours. So Paul is a author, an explorer, a naturalist, the creator of Jungle Keepers, which is an organization to help save the rainforest. And the start of this podcast was just so interesting because they were videotaping in the jungle in a little table with very little lighting, just enough lighting shining on Lex Friedman's body, his face, and enough lighting shining on Paul, his body and his face. And just animals around. It started with a little bit of sunlight, then it got into, because that was the first 30 minutes or so, and then it got quickly dark and just enough light for them to be able to communicate. A lot of topics. They started with Paul started describing the bushmasters, the black caimans, the apex predators of the Amazon, and then the anacondas, 18-foot, 20-foot anacondas. And just all the animals of the rainforest, other mammals, rhinos, and everything. That was the main topic of this podcast. The love that Paul has for this, and how it's just throughout the years he's been able to protect this rainforest, and that's his main goal in his life. And he feels that if we don't do our job as citizens, in this citizens of the world, citizens of nature, that he believes that the rainforest is almost like lungs from it's the organs of the vital organs of the world, that it could have a tremendous impact in our nature, in our ecosystem, and just in our environment. But the direction went back and forth. They even had a little conversation about aliens, and just Paul gave his thoughts on aliens. It just went back and forth, very, very they were having fun in this adventure, in this podcast. But it came back to the main topic, which how Paul invited Lex Friedman about a year ago. He told me, you should join me in the Amazon. We should have we should explore the rainforest, and you should be here, and we'll do the podcast here. Well, you never would have really imagined that Lex could have done it, or would have done it, or even volunteered to do it. but he did. They talked about their experience. They talked about that even a day or two in this jungle can kill you if you're not prepared, if you do not know what you're doing. But Lex was able to do it. Lex was able to go and visit him. Lex was able to interview him and have this 4-hour podcast. And you know what? I listened to it the entirety. I really enjoyed it. I 100% recommend it to you. And I just love that there is such a wide variety of individuals across this great world, that you would have people like Paul protecting, defending, and making their life meaning to protect this great earth. It was just quite amazing. At the very end, kind of in the last 30 minutes of the podcast, you see how a little thin, just the thickness of a pen or a small pencil of a snake started to crawl through their microphones, and Paul grabbed it and was showing it to the camera and to Lex. Look at this great, beautiful snake. Not that I want to forget, but he did mention that snakes are not dangerous to humans. They don't want to be near humans. They just want to. They have a zone, and if we go into that zone, that's when they can just say, "Hey, please get away from me." And if you don't, that's when they get defensive. That's when they might attack. But they attack because they're scared, not because they want to kill a human or kill another animal. So, just a great podcast. A little bit long, 4 hours, not going to lie. But I recommend it to every single one of you all that likes this content, likes this cause, wants to help jungle keepers. And you can see all the comments. It already hit over 1 million views. So great episode, great podcast. So hope you all enjoy what I had for you today. All these summaries, please go, feel free and go click my other episodes. They're still there. They still have more summaries. And then I will continue to bring you this information, bring you these summaries, add value to your day, add value to your content. Have a great day and see you next time.